but it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Hans Diehl. And we can get ready for the lights to be out, please. Dr. Hans Diehl is the gentleman who created a program called CHIP, and that stands for the Complete Health Improvement Program. And it has touched the lives of more than 60,000 people around the world, introducing them to a lifestyle change. He is a professor of epidemiology at Loma Linda University. He is also a professor of lifestyle medicine there, and he started a lifestyle medicine institute in Loma Linda. And it's my great joy to introduce him to you this evening. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Or get old with disease. It's time to decide. The average Canadian will spend their last 10 years in sickness. Change your future at makehealthlast.ca.
I'm delighted to be with you here tonight. Tell us, what did you just learn from this 1-minute clip? What did you learn? What's the lesson? You have a choice. A choice about what? Okay. What your last 10 years will be like. What did you get from the film?
You want to enjoy your last years?
Yeah, you want to enjoy your last 10 years? There you go. Folks, you know what I'm getting out of it? Don't be a Canadian. But we are all Canadians. We are all sharing a similar lifestyle that has become the global lifestyle, the good life. And the good life is not so good. I have a lesson for you tonight. These two items can either be weapons of mass destruction, or they can be instruments of hope, health, and healing. It all depends on how do you use these two tools. First slide. Hello. I want to talk to you tonight briefly about the optimal diet, the importance of diet, and then also how do you really implement this kind of a new concept that is new for some of you perhaps. Do we have the remote on? Is the clicker on? It's not working. Yeah, it's not working. If plan A doesn't work, we have plan B. Welcome to a very special event that is designed to set you up on the best possible life. We're not interested anymore about the good life. What we want to offer you is the best life. And the best life is a life of simplicity, where you're making choices that put you in control of where you want to be. Now, when we look at medicine today, we recognize the fabulous achievements that have become part of the high-tech approach to many of our diseases. We can do incredible things in terms of diagnostics, in terms of broken bones, in terms of infectious diseases, and yet the chronic diseases are not affected by these high-tech wonders. I have to talk to this thing, I think. And so you see today, you have 30% of our deaths are due to heart disease. Another 25% are due to cancer. And when you add diabetes, you begin to realize that 65% of our causes of death are largely self-related. We can do more for ourselves than any gadget, any surgery, any hospital when it comes to these chronic diseases. Today, every third death is due to cardiovascular disease, and yet, take a look at this. 1928, it was very, very rare. It was difficult to find a heart attack in this country 100 years ago, and yet all of this changed because today we have 3,000 deaths from heart disease every day. Something has changed. This is not a disease that we always have had. Then you look at breast cancer rates. We used to have 1 out of 20 women. Now it's 1 out of 7 women. We look at diabetes. And here again, you see a dramatic increase, particularly since 1975, in the rate of diabetes is increased by 300%. This is not a disease that is related to genes. Genes take about 300 years to change in a society. This happened in the last 20, 30 years. This is a disease that is upon us that has to do with environmental issues. And then people have the idea, well, you know, we have so much heart disease, we have so much cancer, we have so much heart disease and diabetes because we live so much longer. Don't we live longer today? How many years have we gained in the last 100 years? Can you read that? Can you read it? We have increased our lifespan by 28 years. People today live to about 77, 78 years of age. So we think, wow, we have so much disease because we live so much longer. Well, let me help you to understand this a bit differently. We thought we had gained 29 years, but much of that gain is related to the fact that the infant mortality dramatically dropped. 100 years ago, every 5th baby died before the age of 1, which means it cut back the average life expectancy of the population. Now, if you make adjustments for the infant mortality, which is basically almost 0 now, and now you look at a 65-year-old person in 1900 lived almost as long as a person today in 2018, and we have all the wonders of modern medicine. 100 years ago, we spent 1% of our income on medical care. Today, it's 19%. Do we live longer? Maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And oftentimes, what we really do, we extend our period of living longer, sicker. And what you really want, you want to live the buoyant, vital, healthy life, be at top performance. So that at the very end, some disease comes upon you, the body basically collapses and it's over. This is not the way we die in our country today. We're sicker longer. The last 20 years, sad stories. And so perhaps we have gained at the best 7, 8 years with all the wonders of medicine. And then you also take a look at this picture here. What do you see there? You see 3 chairs, and the average chair is placed at a level of about 17 inches in width, we see the chairs from 1900 to 1930 to 1970, and the size of the chair has not really changed all that much. Until 1970, it stayed pretty much the same. But then something happened. We've gone from 17 inches for 70 years to all of a sudden to 24 inches. What happened? At the same time, we have to be concerned about the medical costs that we have. Because when it comes to obesity, when it comes to diabetes, when it comes to heart disease, when it comes to certain high blood pressure problems, these are largely self-made diseases. They're promoted by the culture. The culture tells us, eat, drink, and be happy. And if something happens, the doctors will take care of you tomorrow. No, 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 no. We can do some wonderful things in the areas of infectious disease, acute care. Yes, we can. We can make great diagnoses. When it comes to these chronic diseases, there's nothing we can do, medically speaking, to really turn this disease around. We can make you feel better, but it doesn't turn the disease off. We have no cure. When you have diabetes, you will die with insulin on board. When you have high blood pressure, you take the medication, you will die with these medications on board. You have not cured the disease. When you have heart disease, you may have the bypass surgery done, and it might buy you maybe a little time, but you will die from heart disease. But we can turn these diseases off. That's the message tonight. You can turn this disease off, and it all depends what you put at the end of the fork and knife. They can become the tools of health and healing and cure. The library is filled with research studies that make the case. We have over 60, 70,000 people in our CHIP program. We have the same stories that you heard here tonight when this one lady was being described here. Diabetes is gone, high blood pressure is gone, overweight is gone. People are living new, happier lives, and they're saving money. You can reduce your bill for food by 35 to 45% when you make the move from foods as we eat them today in our society towards simpler foods, foods as grown, foods that don't have nutrition labels. Did you get that one? Whenever you have a nutrition label, it's a refined, processed, engineered food. What you want to do is, I'll tell you what I'm going to share with you tonight. What you want to do, you want to zero in more, to eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, not white flour products, whole grains, legumes, beans, and maybe have a few nuts and seeds. And be careful with these foods that have nutrition labels on them, or foods that have warning labels on them. Remember when you used to go to the meat counter? You bought some chicken, and there had a big sign there, be careful, washing, salmonella, and so on, warning signs. Try to think in terms of eating more foods as they come in nature. Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, maybe some nuts and some seeds. That's it. Have a good exercise program. Invest yourself in helping other people. Be a nicer person. Get some good sleep. Have a good pillow to rest on, and I call this a clear conscience. And you're off towards a great start to the best life possible. This is the United States. You see here, we used to spend, I have some trouble with this here. We used to spend in 1960 about 5% of our income on medical care. Today it's 19%, and America has dropped down to be number 50 in longevity in the world, which means that you cannot purchase longevity with money, because longevity and a good life and a healthy life is an achievement. It's rarely something that happens by chance. Are you with me? And so you say, well, what about these bypasses? Well, yeah, we do about 400,000 this year, 150,000 each one, and that's list price, sometimes more if things don't quite work out as successfully. Folks, I have some real trouble with this one here. And yet, when it comes to bypass surgery, many times physicians and people don't want to believe it, that the best and most even-handed estimates are that only 10% of heart attack patients have their life extended after bypass surgery. As a matter of fact, we know that about 40% of these grafted vessels are no longer functional within 12 to 18 months. Because the problem is they close up again because nobody told the people, you gotta change. You cannot keep on smoking. We've done a bypass for you. We probably saved your life here and there, but you gotta make a change because otherwise they're gonna be closing up again on you. You gotta be a total vegetarian. I mean, we're not saying this here as part of being a judgmental directive, but if you want to really safeguard the benefits of one of these special, sometimes life-saving surgical procedures, you have to become your own little doctor. Are you with me? You have to take care of yourself. You have to help the team. Then you have angioplasties. You have these stents. They're very commonly done nowadays. We had a patient the other day who had 9 stents, one after another, because again, these stents do not last. Here you see 30 to 45% of these angioplasties, these stents are no longer functional. Within 6 months, you have to do it again and again and again and again, unless you change. But there's no one there to teach you then. The doctors do the best they know. The surgeon does the surgery. The anesthesiologist gives you the anesthetic. And then you're being discharged. You're fine. You're doing great. You can play golf tomorrow again after the stent. Wait a minute. Didn't anybody take you aside and say, you got to make the change to safeguard this $35,000 procedure? And you say, well, I have insurance. But don't we all pay for it as a society? And then you have medications. Do you realize that we probably have about 250,000 fatal adverse drug reactions that are responsible for 11% of all the deaths in our society, which makes prescription drugs the number 3 cause of death in our society? We're not against medication, but we should be having much more respect for these medications. Medications are always the second line of defense. The first line of defense is, what are you putting into your system? You cannot run an 8-cylinder fancy Ferrari sports car and putting diesel fuel into the engine. You can't. And that's how it is with the human body. You cannot take the most outstandingly designed system and pour anything into it and figure it will all go out somehow. It will all be okay. It won't. Yeah, it comes out, but something else comes out. And so that's what we face in our society. And what do you see here? You see people in green coats. They are mopping up the water on the floor. And there are also, apparently there are some leaky pipes coming from the ceiling. The water comes down. And these people, while they're trying to mop the floor, they're also passing out color-coded umbrellas so people don't get wet anymore. What is wrong with this picture? Yeah, you see, this is sort of an analogy of what we do in medicine. We're mopping up and mopping up and mopping up. The water's coming from the ceiling, and nobody says, hey, what we need is a plumber. And who's the plumber? You and I. We have to fix the leak. We have to bring ourselves into closer harmony with the environment and the design that we were given. And yet, many people have this idea that as long as I have the best physician, the best surgeon, the best hospital, I'm okay. Well, it does help sometimes to make good diagnosis and to have certain complications, of course. But ultimately, what happens to us has to do with what we're willing to do for ourselves. So let me just spend a couple of minutes on the coronal arteries. This is here a coronal artery in cross-section. You can see it's narrowed by atherosclerotic plaque. You can see it here. It's supposed to be wide open, but it only has about 35% of the opening left because you have a buildup of cholesterol and fats and calcium. And these arteries become very brittle. They become very hard. Let me show you a little video clip here to help you to understand what we're talking about. Just trying to increase the ante for the great moment when this film runs. Could there be a conspiracy here? No? Okay, let's bypass it then. We can run some other time. This is then the problem here. We are born with clean arteries, and by the time you're 20 years of age, we already have 20% narrowing. By the time you're 45 years of age, you already have 50% narrowing of these major vessels in the body. This happens to be here, the coronary arteries. They're feeding the heart muscle with oxygenated blood. And when that blood is not flowing at the right rate, then it doesn't bring enough oxygen to the heart muscle, and you can develop angina, for instance. Or if it stops the blood flow, that's what we call a heart attack or myocardial infarction. It's not only the coronary arteries that are being affected, but you see also all the major arteries in the body are being affected by this process called atherosclerosis, and narrowing and a hardening of the arteries, a filling in with cholesterol and fats and calcium. And what's very interesting to me is that you have different specialists for each one of these different areas there. They're all different kinds of diseases. They have different names, but it's really one underlying disease process called atherosclerosis, or hardening and narrowing of the arteries. And so heart disease is basically a hardening of the arteries. Angina, the same thing. Cerebral infarction, that's a stroke that's affecting the vessels of the brain. Senility, again, the hearing loss, visual loss, hypertension, gangrene, impotence. Impotence is largely a food-borne illness where the penile arteries of the men become narrowed down with a buildup of cholesterol and calcium and fats. You thought it was a Viagra deficiency. As people optimize blood flow, like getting away from smoking and moving towards a simpler diet, particularly moving towards a diet of foods as grown, foods that are low in fats, foods that have no cholesterol, foods that have very, very low in saturated fat, the arteries begin to open up again, and the blood is flowing again, and the blood flow can be sustained, and all of a sudden, embarrassed faces begin to brighten up. So these are not natural or necessary components of aging. This has to do with our lifestyle, particularly how we use fork and knife. We can take you to World War II, 1939. The Nazi armies invaded Norway. The people had to give up all their livestock to the armies that were occupying the country. They had to live on a very, very simple diet. The Norwegian people, and over the next year, 5-6 years, look what happened to the heart disease rates. It dropped way down. Diabetes dropped down. Cancer rates dropped down. All weight dropped down. That wasn't the intent of the Nazis, to make Norwegians healthy people again. No. But this was a side effect of moving towards a very self-dependent food supply, where people had to grow their own food in their gardens. This is what we have learned from some of these large studies. It shows you what are some of the predictors for this disease, atherosclerosis and heart disease. And the big lesson here is the three big ones is high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and smoking. These are the three big factors. Then you have diabetes, obesity, triglycerides, and then an inactive lifestyle, stress. And it's in order of importance. The most important ones are at the top of the arch. And please note, do you see the star that are just attached to these factors, these risk factors? Lips, 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 lips. Almost all of these important risk factors, those factors that drive this disease, are under the control of our lips. We're getting into a lot of trouble with our lips, don't we? These chronic diseases are largely food-borne illnesses. They have to do with how we use fork and knife. Just to give you some idea, if you have a very high cholesterol, you have a high blood pressure, you're a smoker, you're diabetes, you didn't pass a treadmill test, you're 35 years of age, the chance of a heart attack in 6 years for 35-year-old men is 140 times higher to take place than if you had ideal cholesterol below 160, you have ideal blood pressure, you don't smoke, no diabetes, and so on. We can do something about these factors. We can lower our cholesterol by 20-25% in 4 to 8 weeks by moving towards a diet that we recommend, to an optimal diet by using fork and knife in a different manner. Move towards foods as grown. Just to give you some more idea here. These are some of the big studies that came out in the 1980s, and they showed that almost all of the coronary events before the age of 65 could be avoided if people would just bring their cholesterol levels down, do something about smoking, and do something about the blood pressure by reducing their salt intake. 87% of our major coronary events could have been avoided. Here's one of the top men, Dr. Jeremiah Stemler. He said, rich diet is the primary, the essential, the necessary cause of the current epidemic of premature atherosclerotic disease, which is raging in Western industrialized countries. Cigarette smoking and hypertension are important secondary and complementary, because the most important factor here, the most important driver, is a rich diet that has become the hallmark of the American society. Here's the Surgeon General. Some of you may remember him, C. Everett Koop. He said out of 2 out of 3 Americans who don't smoke or drink, one personal choice seems to influence long-term health prospects more than any other: what we eat. How do you use your fork and knife? Here you see again, these are large studies that show that 70% of stroke, 71% of cancers, 82% of heart disease, 91% of diabetes type 2 could be totally prevented and avoided if we were making some changes in our diet. The experts are very clear that probably up to 80% of our chronic disease and premature death in this country could be prevented by making some significant changes in how we eat and how we live. I mean, we can take monkeys and we can feed monkeys a typical hospital diet. You know what would happen? After 19 months, these monkeys will have died of massive heart attacks. We always tell our patients, don't stay in the hospital more than 19 months. It could be a dangerous place. And this is one of the most important slides for you tonight. It shows you the diet composition. Diets are made up of calorie foods such as protein, starch, sugar, and fats. Water doesn't have any calories. Vitamins don't have any calories. But it's usually made up of protein, starch, sugar, and fats. Please look at the left side here. This is a typical diet where you cannot find these chronic diseases. And you see the green color? That means about 70 to 80% of the calories eaten in these societies comes from starch. Not just white flour. No, we're talking about unrefined starch, corn, grains, like barley, beans. These kind of foods as they come in nature. They're usually high in nutritional density and high in fiber. But then something happens, and this is what we've discovered over time. As a country becomes more affluent and the income level goes up, so does the diet change. For instance, we no longer eat potatoes. We're becoming more affluent. Now we eat Pringles. We used to eat at home. Now we eat out. We used to have slow food. Now we eat fast food. We used to drink water. Now we drink lemonade. We used to have beans. Now we have burgers. Are you with me? We used to have corn. Now we eat corn chips. And as this change has happened, particularly very prominently in the last 35 years. 1975, 1980 was a big change in the American diet. And so today, you see on the right-hand side the changed diet composition, where you now have much more fat in the diet, much more sugar in the diet, much more protein in the diet, especially come from meat sources, and the amount of starch has shrunk dramatically, and whatever little starch we eat now, it's usually white, floured, refined starch. We have left behind the unrefined starchy foods that used to be high in nutritional value. We have left them out. We have become people of refined taste. And we're paying for it. So, what are the foods that we recommend then? We recommend more fruits, more whole grains, more legumes, more vegetables, because all of these foods are very low in calories and they're low in fat. When you cut back on fat, you immediately reduce the number one source of energy. By that I mean the calories in the diet, and you are now on the way to losing weight. You can eat all you want. You don't have to restrict yourself. You can eat all the whole grains you want, all the legumes. You can eat all the potatoes you want. Potatoes are not fattening. A potato is 100 calories. But you take those Pringles. It's a different story, isn't it? It's very difficult to overeat on foods as it comes to us in nature. Just to give you some idea, here legumes. Take a look at the amount of fiber that you have there. Americans get into their diet every day about 10 to 12 grams a day. That's it, 10 to 12 grams. We're deficient in fiber. It has all kinds of side effects. We should have about 40 to 50 grams of fiber. Americans get about 10 to 12 grams. So if you want to have more fiber, take a look at legumes. The big beans, a half a cup is 8 grams of fiber. That's what you want. Or then you look at vegetables and fruits. You look at Brussels sprouts. You have 5.5 grams of fiber right there. Or you have bread, 2 slices of mixed grain bread, 5 grams of fiber. But you have white bread, it's only 2 grams. The more you refine, the less fiber you have. And then your breakfast cereal, you can have one of these wheat biscuits or bran, half a cup of bran is 9.5 grams of fiber. Or you have rice. Here you have whole wheat pasta, 6 grams of fiber for half a cup. Then you have brown rice, 1.5 grams, but then you have white grams, it's all gone. So you want to be careful in what you do, that you don't refine food so much. Eat food the way it comes to us in nature. And whenever you have this kind of a diet composition that we just talked about, where you have more fat, more sugar, more animal protein, and less starch, you will always have the appearance of heart disease and diabetes and hypertension and cancers. You go to countries where you didn't have these diseases 10 years ago, they changed their diet towards an American diet, and within 5 to 10 years, you have the emergence of these Western killer diseases appearing. That's what happened in China. That's what happened in Japan. They couldn't find heart disease in Japan after World War II. They had to actually buy coronal arteries from one of the medical centers in America so they could show the medical students what killed every second American because they didn't have the disease in Japan. Let me tell you, the Japanese no longer buy these coronal arteries from us anymore because they've become very self-sufficient. They changed their diet and they have their own heart disease now. The way you live, the way you eat, largely determines when you die and what diseases you will develop. What you really want to do, as you see here, you want to leave these refined foods behind and move towards less refined foods. Eat foods as they come in nature. Be careful with the apple pie. Oh, you can have some apple pie once in a while. My wife makes it once in a while, and we always invite 19 friends to share it with. But you see, you could have one slice of apple pie, or you could have eaten 5 apples, which gives you more satiety, which gives you more fulfillment, which gives you more fullness in your intestinal system there. Then we have to look at the change that took place in 1972. It happened right here in Southern California, San Bernardino, McDonald's, fast foods. It grew from 3 billion to 203 billion worldwide. And just to give you some idea of what's happening in the area of processed foods, you know, sometimes people have the idea, well, I just can't lose weight. I mean, there's something wrong with me. It must be my glands. The salivary gland? No, 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 no. And then people get this idea, well, I should pray more about this. And then I say, no, don't pray about this. What do you want to pray for? Oh, you want to pray? Yeah, pray when you go into the store. And before you put the things into your cart, that's when you need to be strong. Once it's in the house, you're a goner. Prayer is too late. We also have to be very careful that we do not place these kind of situations into a morality, moral, judgmental arena. People think, well, why can't they stop eating? Why don't they have more willpower? Folks, it's not that simple. Do you realize that many of these companies that produce these processed foods have been purchased by the tobacco industry? Do you know that the tobacco industry knows exactly how to habituate people? Do you know what they did? They went to some of the largest brain research centers and they asked them, how much sugar do we need to put into this product so that there is that sweet spot? How much salt do I have to put into this product so that they can no longer resist, they have to take a second one? How much fat do we have to put into this product in order to get this mouth feel? And they know exactly what to do. Have you ever wondered why you cannot just eat one M&M? I mean, I don't mean the whole bag. You cannot. Have you ever wondered why you cannot just eat one Pringle? One potato chip? And so let's just unpack this very briefly. Here you see what happened to the amount of sugar in our diet. We used to have 2 teaspoons, now it's 30 teaspoons per person per day. Most of the sugar, of course, no nutritional value. It comes largely from soda pop. We consume about 32 cans a week as a family of 4. And then also look at these fruit juices. You thought they were all right, right? There's just about as much sugar in a fruit juice, even if there's no sugar added, because it's a concentrated, compressed food. It's better to eat the grapes than drinking the grape juice. It's better to eat the orange than to drink the orange juice because you can easily compress, and the sugar, while it's there, it becomes compressed, and you can actually have as much sugar in a glass of orange juice, or in this case, your grape juice, when compared to a soda pop. How about this? Are these cereals? Or is this candy? This is 50% sugar. And what's so tragic is that people that can least afford these things, they buy them. Can you imagine? A person doesn't understand, and so instead of buying 1 pound of oats for less than $2, they buy 1 pound equivalent of grain flour in terms of, in this case, we use the example of Fruit Loops, and here spend $12. People that can least afford these foods buy them because it's all a matter of education, education, education. I hope you understand how fortunate you are that you have here a church that's actually investing itself in serving the community. And that's why people like Chef AJ and I, we travel 2, 3, 4 hours to be with you here today. Because we appreciate what this place is doing for the community. Let's give these folks a hand. Another example here, you can take 12 ears, 14 ears of corn, but if you cannot extrude the oil and you have to eat the corn as it is, you can never overeat on calories. Do you know it takes 14 ears to create 1 tablespoon of corn oil? And do you know how easy it is to have 1 tablespoon of corn oil? Let me show you an example here. This is 9 ounces of corn chips. This is a little bit of corn and a lot of fat. A lot of corn oil. That's what that is. Here you have almost 1,500 calories. That's a half a pound of weight on your rump. In 3 minutes from lips to hips. And it's high in salt. We shouldn't probably have more than about 3,000 to 700 milligrams of salt just in 1 small package of corn chips. You have exceeded the daily allowance very, very significantly. And look at the amount of fat in this little package, 90 grams, and we would be much better off if we had 20 to 25 to 30 grams for the whole day. Do you hear what I said? We should reduce our fat consumption down to the level of 30, maybe 35 grams a day. This little package by itself has 90 grams of fat. Potatoes. You can eat 10 potatoes or you can eat 1 tube of Pringles. It's the same number of calories. You can have 1, what do you call this milkshake? It's a large one, isn't it? Look at this, 2,000 calories. You don't need more, as a woman, you don't need more than 1,500 calories for the whole day. This is just 1 snack. And people always forget, oh, snacks count too? Oh, yeah. And then when you have these refined foods, you always have more sodium on these products. For instance, do you see here, when you have corn, there's very little sodium in corn unless you add it to it. But if you have cornflakes, it's 260 times more salt or sodium. Whenever you refine foods, you usually add salt. And so the American diet then basically consists of empty calories. What does it mean, empty calories? No nutritional value. But 44% of the American diet is devoid of any nutritional value. These are empty calories coming from sugar and from fats and from alcohol. And so as we have seen the shift from food to products, we see that the products are no longer carrying the same nutritional density and value that it was before. And then, so this is one big change, the change from foods, natural foods, foods as grown, to processed foods. That's one big shift. 44% of our calories that we eat today comes from foods that have no nutritional value. Then you have the second big shift in the last 100 years to eating more animal products. Do you see we have gone from 124 pounds to 201 pounds per person per year? Did you ever think about this, that the average meat eater consumes 12 cows in a lifetime? I mean, imagine this. I mean, you eat everything from the lips to the tail, the whole thing. Plus 25 hogs. You devour the whole thing. You leave nothing out except the oink. And then you have 2,000 some chickens who have never seen, oftentimes, the sunlight for one day of their lives, coming from factory farms. Folks, a change has taken place. And yet when you talk about meat, people have the idea, well, I need to have the protein. Folks, let's take a look at this here. This is now sirloin steak. Sirloin steak is 75% fat and 25% protein. When you think of meat from now on, think in terms of it's a high fat food. When you look at processed meats, like the salamis, when you look at the American hot dog at the bottom here, remember, that's 85% fat and 15% protein. These are not high protein foods. These are high fat foods. And if I would tell you what's in a hot dog, I doubt whether anybody would eat another hot dog. And here you see what the World Health Organization announced after a large review of 800 of the best studies ever done. They said, the World Health Organization declares processed meat a group 1 human carcinogen, just like tobacco and asbestos and diesel fuels. They're no longer saying that if you eat too much of this food, it could possibly lead to cancer. No, it says there's a cause and effect relationship here. We can give you formulas that tell you the amount of processed meat that you have in your system that you eat on an everyday basis can give you a predictable likelihood of developing particularly colon cancer. This is real. I mean, we all know that smoking causes cancer. Every second person dies from lung cancer because of smoking. And so we can also make predictions based on the amount of processed foods. And we're now also looking at the red meat in general as a probable carcinogen, probably causing lung cancer, especially the different kinds of cancer in the body. And then you have to also begin to recognize, aside from the increase in the meat products, you have seen a dramatic increase, especially in 1975. Look what happened in 1975, the amount of cheese. We used to eat about 4 pounds per year per person. Now it's more like 35 pounds of cheese per person per year. What happened in 1975? How come all of a sudden we eat so much more cheese? What happened? Help me. Oh, yeah, cheeseburgers. Yeah, that's right. Fast foods, right? That's number one. Number two, what else? Americans said we do not want to drink any more whole milk because whole milk has saturated fat. And saturated fat causes the liver to produce extra cholesterol. Therefore, we do not want to have whole milk. We want to have skim milk. So the dairy industry says, no problem. We'll give you what you want. They give you skim milk and cheese. And so when you look at cheese, it's about 71% fat. It's a high-fat product. You have some of these cream cheeses here. Philadelphia cheese, for instance, it's 90% fat. You might as well eat Vaseline. That's 100% fat. And then you look at the death rates from cholesterol. The higher the cholesterol number, the more coronary deaths you will have in a society. Let me say that again. The higher the cholesterol number, the more likelihood you will have the risk for coronary deaths. For instance, the best rates of coronary deaths were found in people that have cholesterol of 150. The highest were found that had 300 plus. And you can see there's a 5-fold differential there. Just cholesterol alone becomes a very powerful predictor, and that's why we want you to take this lesson home. You don't want to have a normal American cholesterol. A normal American cholesterol is 200. When you look around people around the world, you find that people that have no heart disease, they have cholesterol numbers of 80 or 90 or 100 or 120, 140, 150 is high for them. In our society, we think if we have 199, we're doing okay. It's just, it's a normal cholesterol for Americans, and a normal cholesterol for Americans is normally related to heart disease. Don't be normal. Try to get the cholesterol down, not with medication, but get it down with diet. And diet is the surest and the safest and the cheapest way to do it. And when you bring your cholesterol down, you also bring down your triglycerides. You begin to lose weight. You have your blood pressure coming down. Your blood sugars, everything is beginning to improve. Remember that nothing drives the cholesterol in the body more than the amount of saturated fat. When you look at the cholesterol in the bloodstream, it's determined by the amount of saturated fat that you eat, and number two, the amount of cholesterol that you eat, and then the amount of certain fibers. Where do you find cholesterol in food? Only in animal products. Where do you find saturated fat? Almost only in animal products. And where do you find fiber? Not in animal products. Fiber is zero in animal products. So you have 3 strikes against you when you are consuming a diet that's high in meat and animal products. Well, I should tell you, there are some oriental oils that perhaps could also contribute to high cholesterol numbers, because these are fats that are very high in saturation, aside from the animal products. And these are the palm oils. So be careful with palm oil. And be really, really careful with coconut. Coconut oil has the highest saturation of any food that you can possibly put into your body. That's why we always recommend to people, use coconut oil, but put it on your skin and on your scalp, never inside your body. The Heart Association is very, very clear. They had a big conference about this a few weeks ago and said, don't use coconut oil. This is just sort of a new fad that's coming from Indonesia. The coconuts are cheap there. The profit margins are large. They can put a lot of money into marketing, and they tell you, if you have your coconut oil, don't worry about Alzheimer's anymore. Folks, there is not scientific shred of evidence for these kind of claims. Be very, very, very careful. Be very careful with coconut oil, with palm oils, with all saturated fats. And remember, the #1 source of saturated fat in the diet in America today is cheese. Cheese is driving the cholesterol more than anything else because of the large amount that we eat. But the strongest driver is coconut oil because of the high saturation level. So this is the American diet. And then you're surprised why we have all these chronic diseases. So this is the American diet. 51% is processed foods with a nutrition label. 35% is from animal products, and only 40%. This is what I want to drive home tonight. I'm going to take another 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'm going to close. 14%, only 14% of the calories that we eat, only 14% comes from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Everything else is processed foods or animal products. So let me take you to Loma Linda. I know where I'm coming from. It's called the Blue Zone. That's where you have some of the longest living people in North America. And they found that when you look at Adventist people in general, half of these people are sort of lacto-ovo-vegetarians, and the other half are usually animal product-oriented people. They eat meat. And when they compare these Adventists that are lacto-ovo, that means they take dairy products and they take eggs, but no meats. In every case, the lacto-vegetarian Adventists have only half the amount of high blood pressure when compared to their faith brethren that are meat eaters. They have only 2/3 the amount of arthritis. They only have half the amount of colon cancer, and they only have 2/3 the amount of prostate cancer. So if you wanted to reduce your risk of these cancers and this chronic disease, what do you think is a good idea? Move towards which color? Green, yeah, right, you got it. So they did another big study, 2002. It's a 7-year study. They enrolled 100,000 Adventists in North America, and they found out that the Adventists actually divide themselves up into about 10% of them are vegans. They're not from Las Vegas. They don't use any animal products. About 30% of these people are lacto-ovo. 10% of them are vegetarians, but they eat fish. And about 50% of the Adventists are meat eaters, carnivores, omnivores. So the question is, over the next 5 years, the researchers asked questions. What do you think happened to these people in the different dietary groups? Who do you think did the best? Well, you're just prejudiced, right? Now look at this here. These are Adventist women. Adventist women that are meat eaters are on the average 180 pounds. The vegans are only 141 pounds. If you want to lose weight, what color would you choose? Yeah. Men, the same thing. Men, Adventist men that are meat eaters, they on the average weigh on the average about 32 pounds more than those people that are totally committed to a vegetarian plant-based diet. Diabetics, they found that the meat eaters had about 4 times more diabetes than the vegans, 6.3 versus 1.6, 4 times more diabetes. They also found that people that had high blood pressure, meat eaters had about 4 times more high blood pressure problems on medication, and people that were meat eaters had about 5 times more often high cholesterol numbers on medication. So again, it's a very clear trend here, isn't it? The further you move towards the green color, the better you're off. And some of you say, well, I cannot make that jump all at once. It's okay. Remember, somebody said tonight, make changes as you feel ready for them. Begin to move. Read some books. Look at the film Forks Over Knives. Have some friends. Have some dinner parties with healthy foods, and become more familiar with the wonders of a dietary lifestyle that is protecting the animals. It is. We kill 1 million animals every hour in this country. Compassion. It helps with the climate control. Lots of research is helping us to understand this better. And so let me just give you the last few items here. This is the work by Dr. Dean Ornish. He had severely diseased coronary artery patients. Half of these people he put on a very, very simple diet. This was very, very low fat. This is exactly what Chef AJ is going to share with you in a few minutes here, to cutting back on the high fat content. This is a very low fat content, vegetarian, and over the next 1 year, 82% of these patients with angina pain and heart disease had their vessels beginning to open up, and the atherosclerotic plaque began to melt down within 1 year. Dr. Esselstyn in the Cleveland area, he took the Walking Dead. These were heart disease patients. They were given 6-12 months to live. They had already bypassed surgeries and stents and everything else. And they came to him and said, we want to live. Are you really willing to do what I'm going to tell you to do? Yes. What are we supposed to do? Eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, cut back on fats, particular fats and oils, cut back on sugars and salt, and eat food as it comes in nature, simply prepared. What happened? Here you see some of the special x-rays of the coronal arteries. The artery is clogged up here. There's very little blood flowing through this artery here. This is the coronal artery. This is 2.5 years later, the same artery, no medication, no surgery, just simple foods, and the vessel is beginning to open up again. Let me show you one more. Let's see if we can have our video working right now. Okay, let's try it. Next slide.
How did you lose so much weight? What kind of diet are you on?
Well, the short answer is I went on essentially a plant-based diet. I live on beans, legumes, vegetables, fruit, no dairy, and it changed my whole metabolism, and I lost 24 pounds, and I got back to basically what I weighed in high school. But I did it for a different reason. But I mean, I wanted to lose a little weight, but I didn't dream this would happen. I did it because after I had this stent put in, I realized that even though it happens quite often that after you have bypasses, you lose the veins because they're thinner and weaker than arteries. The truth is that it clogged up, which means that the cholesterol was still causing buildup in my vein that was part of my bypass. And thank God I could take the stents. I don't want it to happen again. So I did all this research, and I saw that 82% of the people since 1986 who have gone on a plant-based, no dairy, no meat of any kind, no chicken, turkey. If you can do it, 82% of the people who've done that have begun to heal themselves. Their arterial blockage cleans up. The calcium deposit around their heart breaks up. This movement has been led by a doctor named Caldwell Esselstyn at the Cleveland Clinic, Dean Ornish in Minoa in California, the doctors Campbell, father and son, who wrote the China study, and a handful of others.
And this is the new entertainment style of the president. He's become a total vegetarian. And what I want to show you is that fork and knife can be weapons of mass destruction, or they can be instruments of hope, health, and healing. Food can either be the slowest form of poison, or food can be the safest and most powerful form of medicine. Let me show you the last two slides. How do you implement this? We will discuss that with AJ later on. We want you to think in terms of when you prepare your food, don't have any cholesterol in the food. If you can, move in that direction. Cut back on your salt, cut back on your sugar, cut back on your fat, increase your fiber, and you won't have any more taste. No. Remember, the taste buds regenerate, the taste buds renew themselves, and after 3-4 weeks, you will taste food that you have never tasted before because you have now intensified taste perception. Thank you very much.